Hey everybody, today we are going to talk about milestones. And there's nothing more rewarding to a parent than seeing your kids go through those milestones, taking their first step, crawling for the first time, saying their first words. Those are all fantastic experiences that we get to experience as parents. And there's nothing more frustrating for a parent also when there might be some delay in some of those milestones. So in this video, we want to talk about number one, how the milestones develop, how and why the brain and the body goes through those certain milestones. And then we also want to talk about some reasons as to why some kids might have some delays in some of those milestones as well. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how we can help as chiropractors to help those kids reach those milestones or get unstuck if they are stuck in a phase where they are getting to a point where they should be reaching those milestones, but they're not currently. So, but that ties into what I wanted to say. And there's a lot of pressure on kids and on babies to meet these milestones based on a timeline. Right? You want your kid to be crawling between 6 and 9 months, walking by 12 months, talking by 12 to 14 months, saying this many words by 18 months, and saying this many words by 28 to 30 months. And there's just a lot of pressure based on time. And I want to say that timing is not nearly as important as the order in which those milestones develop. Order is way more important than timing. And I want to explain to you why. Okay, as a baby grows, as a baby is born, okay, the basic only part of the brain that is functioning within a baby is the brain stem. Okay, so at birth, the brain stem is really the only part of the brain that's firing, and the reason for that, or the signs, or the way that you can identify that literally is because a baby can really only do the basic functions to survive. A baby can eat, sleep, and poop, right? The brainstem governs the heart rate, the breathing, it governs digestion, it governs most of the autonomic function of the body, the things that happen automatically that we don't have to think about. And there's some reflexes built in there. So the sucking reflex, which is essential for life. If a baby can't eat or can't suck, then it can't get nutrition, and it will not fare well. So a bunch of different reflexes and some basic functions of life. That is the brainstem. And that is also why a baby can't walk, a baby can't talk, a baby can't move their head by itself, a baby can't think, consciously make thoughts. That is just because the brain is not reached that point of development. So as the baby gets older and a couple months go by and they start to move their eyes a little bit, they start to pick their head up, they start to roll around. The reason they're able to do that stuff is because the next part of the brain starts to fire and starts to grow and starts to develop. And that's the cerebellum and the motor cortex of the body, motor and speech cortexes of the brain. Sorry, of the brain, not the body. And that part of the brain starts to fire and develop. And the way in which the body and the brain communicate for the brain to start firing those new neural connections is we get that information from the environment. So a baby sees, a baby hears, a baby smells, a baby tastes, and their brain receives that input. So for instance, for a baby that's learning to move their head and turn their head and learning to smile, learning to make sounds, right? That is all information coming from the baby's external environment. So they see their parent smile at them. They feel the parent holding them. They hear sounds coming from their brothers and sisters and things like that. They're feeling things with their hands. They're finding out that they can move their arms a little bit. They can move their fingers. If they touch this happens. If they smile, this happens. If they cry, this happens. Those are all things that the brain is learning from the environment. And the way that the brain learns, it gets that information from the environment is through the spinal cord. And this is like one big highway going from the external environment to the brain. So brain receives information and brain then tells the body how to respond. And that constant communication from brain to body is where the brain starts to grow and learn. Just like a muscle would learn from using that muscle, the brain is learning from experiencing life that a baby is going through. Now, the brain grows from the bottom top and from the back front. Okay, bottom to top, back to front. That's how the brain develops. So as a baby starts to learn these new tasks, a baby cerebellum is the next part, and the motor cortex that we talked about earlier in speech. That's why a baby can start to pick their head up. That's why a baby then starts to crawl. That crawling phase is super important. A baby that goes from basically nothing to walking and skips the crawling phase, that's not good. That is not a sign that the kid is more advanced because they just went right to walking. The baby needs to crawl because that order of milestone is important. Crawling is so important because the left to right, that crisscross crawl, is where the left and the right sides of the brain start to communicate, which is very important for brain development. So see how the order becomes more important than the timing, right? It is way better to see a kid go from crawling from 6 to 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, to then walking at 10 to 12 months, or 12 months to 14 months, than to see a kid or a parent come in and say, oh yeah, they didn't really crawl, but by 9 months they were walking. Like, that is not good, right? Okay, so then we go to walking, and then we got speech development, right? And we get into that part of the brain and that part of development. And then the last part of the brain to develop is more of the frontal cortex of the brain, and that one doesn't develop until they're much, much older, into the toddler and even teenage and even adult years. The brain is not fully mature until those adult years, even into the 20s. And there's all evidence of that, because every one of you watching this video can think back to sometime in your younger teenage, even early mid 20s year age time frame, where you were thinking of something, you had an idea, you had a plan, you were doing something, and it just seemed like a no-brainer to you. And then looking back on it, you're like, why did I think that, right? That's because the brain wasn't fully mature and developed, and because your brain had learned from prior experiences. But that's just kind of a funny little way to think of it. But that is how the brain and the milestones and all that stuff fits into things. So chiropractically speaking, when we assess the spine, what we are looking for, and we assess the nervous system, is we are looking for subluxation. Subluxation is stress and tension, or a roadblock that's along this highway, right? So if you have subluxation and there's a roadblock that's preventing the brain from communicating and getting that input from the environment adequately, then that is going to prevent and delay some of these processes, some of these steps of brain development. So when we work with kids and we work with them, whatever phase of development they're in, our objective is to remove this roadblock here within that neural spinal system, within the spine, using neurologically focused chiropractic care. When we can remove this roadblock, then that highway from brain to body is able to be free and clear, and those stages of brain development are able to build and grow like they were designed to. So I hope this video reaches you, and I hope it explains everything in a pretty simple, basic way in terms of milestone development. If you know anybody that's struggling with any of those milestone delays or developments, or maybe you have a child that's past all that, but you're thinking back and you're like, well, yeah, my kid didn't really go through a crawling phase, or my kid was a little speech delayed, or was, a little, some form of milestone development, then please reach out to us, because oftentimes the cause of that being here within that roadblock can lead to other neurological issues down the road, like sensory issues, ADHD, anxiety, sensory processing, autism, all of those different aspects in terms of neurological development. So Thanks for watching this, guys. We'll catch you next time.